Picture a map of the United States. Now, imagine drawing a pin at every river where a young man, college-aged, athletic, academically successful, socially active, was found drowned under unusual conditions. Dozens of pins across multiple states, across years, across seasons. The profile is always eerily similar. A male, between the ages of 19 to 28, a college student, having a night out, drinking, vanishes, and is found in water. Clothing is intact, toxicology rarely complete, inconclusive autopsies, and authorities call the deaths, and I quote, accidents. Police call them misadventure. Families call them not possible. And for two retired New York police detectives, Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, they call them murder. According to their theory, a decentralized group of killers across the Midwest and the Northeast are abducting young men, killing them, and placing their bodies in the water, marking crime scenes with graffiti of a smiling face. But the real story is not the theory itself, it's everything around it. The resistance from police, the contradictions in evidence, the patterns too strange to ignore, the cases that fit and the ones that don't, the possibility that multiple truths exist at once. This is not the story of a proven killer, it's the story of a pattern, and whether the pattern is real or something we're forcing into shape. Some stories don't hide in the dark, they wait for someone to turn around toward them. And I'm Mr. Bones, and this is The Night Tales Show. Our story begins with a disappearance. Patrick McNeil in New York City, 1997. Now, Patrick was a student at Fordham University. He was smart, driven, and beloved. And on February 16, 1997, he went out drinking with friends in the Upper East Side. Witnesses said he left a bar, stumbled slightly, and walked south, alone. He was never seen alive again. His body was found in April, floating near Staten Island. Medical examiners ruled it an accidental drowning, but something was wrong. Patrick's body showed ligature marks, subtle but undeniable. His body had drift patterns inconsistent with currents. His timeline didn't match the decomposition level. And for New York police detectives Kevin Gannon, this wasn't a drowning. This was a message, and he promised to the McNeil family he would never let the case go. What he didn't know was that Patrick's death would lead him into a 20-year investigation involving dozens of young men, 5 states, and a symbol that changed everything. A simple smiley face graffiti found near multiple recovery sites. Was it coincidence? Maybe a calling card? Was it projection? Or something darker? We move forward. Between 1997 and 2008, Gannon and Duarte began noticing cases that felt similar. Smart, athletic male students, disappearance after bar or a party, and unusual behavior or sudden departure. They were found in water days or weeks later. Their cell phones are missing, no signs of robbery or assault. The bodies were placed, not naturally drifted, and many shown signs of post-mortem positioning, possible restraint, ride marks, scrapes inconsistent with riverbeds. For every case police closed as drowning, the detectives found questions. Why were the men found wearing their shoes? Why were their wallets never stolen? Why were some found miles upstream against currents? Why did lividity patterns not match where the bodies were found? And most chilling, why were smiley faces painted or carved near many of these recovery locations? Not all of them, and not consistently the same design. Not always fresh, but enough to raise suspicion that this was not random graffiti. Alright, so let's list some of the cases investigators say fit the pattern. Number 1, there's Chris Jenkins from Minneapolis in 2002. He was found in the Mississippi River. Family said police ignored evidence of struggle. The clothing was neat, shoes were still tied, and smiley face graffiti under the bridge upstream where he was found. Number 2, Tommy Booth from Pennsylvania in 2008. Now, he disappeared from a bar and was found in a shallow creek. His autopsy raised multiple red flags, and again, a smiley face was drawn near a fence behind the bar. Up next, we have Dakota James from Pittsburgh in 2017. He disappeared after leaving work colleagues. Cameras caught him walking confidently, then turning abruptly into an alley. He was found 40 days later in the Ohio River. Ligature marks questioned but not confirmed. Number 4, we have Brian Welsing from Chicago in 2000. Now, he vanished during a New Year's Eve trip, was found in Lake Michigan weeks later, and family rejected the ruling of accidental drowning. Now, there's dozens of more cases that exist. The detectives say as many as 45 cases are connected to the smiley face killer. Critics say fewer than 10 show legitimate overlap. So, which is true? To answer that, we need to go deeper. The alleged killer or killers operate within a geographic arc, sometimes called the Midwest Drowning Belt. That includes cities such as Minneapolis, Chicago, La Crosse, Madison, Pittsburgh, Columbus, New York City. It also includes college towns, rivers, bars. It includes crowded nights in cold water, and the detectives believe that the killers use local knowledge of river access and surveillance blind spots. There's the urban college nightlife and alcohol impairment that they use as camouflage, and maybe it's a network and not a lone killer. But it does seem that they're organized and it's not chaotic. However, law enforcement does disagree with all of it. To understand the debate, we need to examine the science. Accidental drownings follow predictable patterns. Clothing is usually disheveled, shoes are often missing, and body positions are consistent with current direction of the water. Decomposition is predictable for temperature, and toxicology is logical for alcohol levels. But many smiley face cases show inconsistencies. Too little decomposition for time and water. Bodies are found against the current, and there's signs of possible restraint. There's also minimal water in the lungs, and skin damage is inconsistent with river travel. There's a high rate of missing cell phones in these cases as well. And maybe most unsettling is the fact that some bodies appear to have been stored before being placed in water. Now, this is not typical of accidental drowning, but again, nothing is conclusive. So let's talk about the name of the killer. In many cases, investigators found a smiley face drawn near recovery or last seen locations. It included paint, chalk, spray, it might have been carved, and critics say that it's coincidence, that smiley faces exist everywhere. Supporters say, but not like this, not with timing and this precision. Psychologists say that if a killer or group is involved, symbols may vary. The face may represent a ritual, signature, or taunt. The public says, we can't tell if this is real or if we're forcing the symbol into the narrative. And that uncertainty is where the legend grows teeth. When a disappearance happens in a crowded bar district, you expect witnesses. But in smiley face cases, the sightings tend to be inconsistent, uncertain, vague, sometimes contradictory, and strangely delayed. A witness might say, I think I saw him turning down the alley. I swear he left with 2 guys, or maybe he didn't. He looked uncomfortable, like he was being led. He walked away suddenly, like someone called out to him. And in case after case, the final confirmed sighting feels off. Researchers noticed similarities in multiple cities. Usually they were last seen walking with purposeful steps, not stumbling. Last seen leaving abruptly, mid-conversation or mid-ride share. Last seen heading toward isolated paths, not toward home. Witnesses hesitate, unsure of what they saw. Many say the victim looked confused, not intoxicated. This confusion has fueled theories. Those theories include possible drugging, coercion, disorientation unrelated to alcohol, panic responses triggered by unknown stimuli. Police consistently dismiss these witness statements, labeling them unreliable. But there are too many of them to ignore. Not identical, but similar enough that a pattern emerges, a pattern of last moments that feel guided, not random. In the 2000s, cases began to include cell phone, GPS, and surveillance data. What investigators found only deepened the mystery. Phones that stop transmitting suddenly. They're not drained batteries, not gradually fading, they're just dead, instantly. Phones begin to vanish, and SIM cards are removed, and some devices were never recovered. In some cases, a victim walks steadily, then turns sharply into low visibility areas. The path shows long pauses in odd locations, and the final ping occurs miles away from where the body is found. Now, nothing here proves an abduction, but it doesn't read like an accident either. Bars and cities are filled with cameras, yet in many cases, the footage is missing, the cameras malfunction, some segments might be lost, and victims might pass through blind spots unusually frequently. Now, is this a coincidence? A skeptic will say yes, but a pattern analyst will say not in this many cases. Serial killers often target vulnerable victims, isolated victims, consistent demographic markers. But the alleged smiley face killers, they choose the educated, athletic, popular, disciplined, driven, high-functioning young men. This is not typical. It's not predation of weakness. It resembles predation of challenge. But if this is an organized group, as detectives propose, then the motive might not be dominance or sadism. It might be initiation or ritual. Or maybe a fixed ideology. Maybe it's something we haven't identified. If this is not an organized group, then we are witnessing a terrifying coincidence in which dozens of high-functioning men drown with near-identical circumstances. Which explanation is more frightening? Medical examiners are trained to classify drownings based on diatoms in the organs, water levels in the lungs, skin slippage patterns, insect activity, decomposition timing, and rigor mortis. But smiley face cases often come back with insufficient water in the lungs, internal decomposition that doesn't match external avidity, inconsistent with where the body was found, insect patterns suggesting time on land, not in water. Some examiners privately admitted, off the record, that certain bodies appeared to have been kept somewhere else prior to entering the water. But none would put those suspicions in writing. Now, why is that? Well, there's several reasons why. Could be due to liability, bureaucracy, fear of litigation, fear of ridicule. They might have understaffed offices, but there might also be police pressure to close cases. Urban drownings being statistically common, the silence around these autopsies is not proof of a killer. But silence is data as well, and this data whispers that something is off. One of the cases often debated by researchers is Luke Hugh, a 22-year-old from Minnesota. Luke left a bar around midnight, and he walked out alone. Witnesses said he wasn't heavily intoxicated. His phone stopped transmitting 2 blocks away. His body was found 5 miles upriver, upstream. Could a body drift upstream? Hydrologists say no, not naturally. Police said that the currents behave unpredictably, but the scientists disagreed, and the family disagreed as well. Luke's body showed less decomposition than the number of days he was missing. His clothes looked positioned, not weathered. There were small marks on his upper arms that could be from restraint, but it could also have been from debris. No conclusive answer exists. What is the truth? Well, you're going to have to decide for yourself. That leads us to our next case. In Michigan, 2005, 24-year-old Todd Geeb leaves a bonfire party and vanishes. He sends a final text, "I'm in a field." 3 weeks later, he is found standing upright in a lake, feet touching the bottom, head above water, suspended by nothing. Authorities ruled it a drowning, but his lungs contained almost no water. He had no major injuries. Decomposition suggested that there was time on land. He was last seen miles from the water. The lake was not deep enough to submerge a body upright naturally, so families started to begin to believe that he was placed there. Police insisted that it was impossible to know, and the smiley face graffiti that was left near the lake, it was dismissed. Coincidence? Again? Officially, law enforcement rejects the smiley face theory. Their reasons are that drownings are common in young, intoxicated males. Smiley face graffiti is ubiquitous. There's no physical evidence of homicide, no consistent literature marks, autopsy variations explained by water conditions, and there's no known suspects. No identical signatures across the cases. They argue the theory spreads panic and undermines resources. But critics point out that many departments never tested for GHB, which is a drug. Some dismissed evidence without review. Others ignored witness contradictions. Some refused to reopen cases despite new analysis. Agencies do not communicate across state lines, and the truth is difficult to determine because if this is a real serial killer group, the patterns are subtle. And if this is coincidence, the coincidences become far too many. Which leads us to 2 major academic investigations that started to weigh in on the cases. The first is the Center for Homicide Research. They concluded that the theory lacked solid evidence, claimed that the patterns were illusionary, and said that drownings fit statistical norms. The University of Wisconsin did a study and found that no evidence of organized killer groups, but admitted some cases displayed anomalies that warrant deeper review. In other words, it can't be proven, it can't be dismissed, and most importantly, there is no alternative theory that explains all of the anomalies. Researchers of these cases proposed 3 major possibilities. The first is that there's a decentralized group. This would be independent cells across states, sharing ideology, not leadership, no communication that's traceable, and no consistent signature, each adopting a similar victim profile. The second is a single highly mobile individual. Now, this individual would be traveling often, targeting nightlife, and dumping bodies in water to destroy evidence. The third is coincidence amplified by media narrative. Now, these are river cities with intoxicated students, usually during harsh winters, and sometimes these are with under-policed waterfronts. Now, this could include confirmation bias and pattern illusion. But which one explains reality? Well, None perfectly. That alone makes the case worth studying. There are 5 facts that remain stubborn in these cases. Many victims had lower alcohol levels than predicted. Several bodies showed time gaps in decomposition. A number were found in unnatural positions, some recovered in places impossible by natural drift, and many had belongings organized that were not scattered. Individually, it might be explainable, but collectively, these cases are something else. To understand these cases, we must examine the inner landscape of disappearance. What it means for a healthy young man to suddenly behave irrationally, leave friends without explanation, or walk toward danger without noticing. Psychologists specializing in missing persons behavior highlight several possible explanations. It could be due to sudden disorientation triggered by substances or environment. Even mild alcohol can cause momentary confusion, misjudgment of direction, misinterpretation of social cues. But these men often appear deliberate, not stumbling. The second would be drugging. So the possibility of GHB or another incapacitating agent was largely ignored in early cases because toxicology windows are small. Hospitals don't routinely test for it, and many victims were found days or weeks later. Several families privately suspected drugging, noting their sons seemed uncharacteristically compliant or vacant in final sightings. The third would be fight or flight that was hijacked. A person experiencing overwhelming fear, even unexplained, may separate from friends, retreat to isolated areas, abandon safe routes, and appear guided by panic. But the consistent profile across states raises eyebrows. The fourth would be coercion without violence. Now, if someone authoritative, familiar-looking, or persuasively approached a victim at the right moment, compliance isn't shocking. Humans are social animals. We want to avoid conflict. We want to trust. The tragedy is that predators know this. There is a phenomenon in criminology called herd drowning. Clusters of accidental drownings among similar populations, college towns, cold rivers, and alcohol combine into predictable accidents. Critics lean on this heavily, but when researchers compare statistical herd drowning patterns to the Smiley Face cluster, several mismatches began to emerge. First mismatch was that the victim demographic was too narrow. Most accidental drownings involve a wider range of ages, genders, physical conditions. The Smiley Face list is unusually specific. The second mismatch is seasonality differences. Accidental drownings spike in warm weather. Smiley Face cases peak in winter. Mismatch number 3, drowning site distances. Bodies are being found miles from last seen points, especially upstream. Now, this is not typical. The fourth mismatch, behavior was prior to disappearance. Accidental victims usually show progressive intoxication, but Smiley Face victims often exhibit sudden behavioral shifts. The patterns don't lie, but we don't know if these patterns represent design, or if a different kind of accident we don't know yet understand. That leads us to our next case, Chris Jenkins' investigation. Chris Jenkins was a 21-year-old from the University of Minnesota who disappeared on Halloween night in 2002. Police ruled it accidental drowning, but a deeper reconstruction shows that Chris left the bar still wearing his jacket. People leaving bars to smoke or wander rarely keep winter jackets on indoors, so this implies that he was leaving permanently, not just stepping outside casually. His phone and items were left untouched. There was no robbery, no sign of a struggle, and nothing of value was missing. His body was found upright, arms crossed. Now, this is extremely unusual in drownings, which led the medical examiner to reverse the ruling to a homicide. This is one of the very few official reversals in the entire cluster. Even eerier, a Smiley Face was found beneath the bridge upstream. Now, is that a coincidence? Is that a pattern? Maybe we are projecting in this case. Whatever it is, the case remains fully unsolved. Even with the ruling of homicide, the how and why remain blank. Let's take a look at another case, the Dakota James controversy. This happened in Pittsburgh in 2017. Dakota James, a 23-year-old, leaves a night out with coworkers. He was last seen on surveillance moving confidently, not stumbling. Then, all of a sudden, he stops, and he turns sharply into an alley, and he vanishes. His body was found 40 days later, and it showed minimal decomposition, ligature-like marks on the neck, conflicting autopsy interpretations, and the official ruling? An accidental drowning. But here are the contradictions. The body's condition didn't match 40 days in water. A forensic pathologist hired by the family stated that Dakota had not been in the river the entire time. His behavioral snap turn on camera, He pivots into a dark alley as if he's following someone or responding to a cue. And then there's the missing time. 40 days is an unusually long interval for a drowning victim to go undiscovered in an urban river. There's also the absence of water-related injuries. Bodies transported by currents typically don't show abrasions and tearing, but Dakota didn't. These contradictions haunt the case, and police stand firm on drowning. Families and independent experts strongly disagree. Both sides feel certain, but certainty doesn't equal truth. One of the most unsettling hypotheses raised by independent investigators is that some victims were not in water for the majority of their missing period. Indicators include decomposition levels that are inconsistent with days missing. Certain cases show that bodies were too intact for extended water immersion. Also, skin conditions suggesting that they were in a dry environment. Waterlogging patterns don't match these timelines. And there's also the temperature-induced preservation. Cold climates could slow decomposition, but not to the degree seen in some victims. There's also the lack of aquatic damage. There's no algae, minimal predator marks, no typical silt patterns. This suggests, though does not prove, the possibility of holding locations. That could include a garage, a basement, maybe an abandoned building, a vehicle. We don't know. And that uncertainty becomes the void where theories thrive, and only if the theory is correct. Behavioral analysts suggest a possible offender profile. They are organized and not chaotic. Victims vanish cleanly. Bodies are found intact. Items aren't stolen. They have knowledge of the terrain. They use the frequent use of rivers, storm drains, access points, blind paths, unlit bridges. They know it all. They are comfortable operating in groups. A single offender would struggle to abduct healthy young men repeatedly without leaving more evidence. Their motives are unknown or thematic. Possible motives would include thrill, domination, ritual, ideology, gang-like initiation, exploiting nightlife vulnerability, opportunity combined with planning. But without identifiable suspects, profiling remains speculation. In the past 5 years, cases fitting the pattern continue. College-aged males, last seen near nightlife, disappears, found in water, and there's unexplained gaps in the timeline. Social media has revived the theory. There are TikTok investigations that have popped up. There are Reddit deep dives. There are independent data mapping, which leads us to public pressure on police departments. Modern voices aren't just believing the theory, they're demanding answers for the inconsistencies, not for the mythology. And that distinction matters. People aren't asking, is there a serial killer? They're asking, why do so many cases end with unsatisfying explanations? The Smiley Face Killer theory survives because it reflects generational fear. Young adults disappearing during ordinary nights out feels too relatable. It exposes blind spots in urban safety, waterfronts, bar districts, surveillance gaps. It also challenges authority. Police insist the drownings are accidents, but families, researchers, and the public see contradictions. It also represents the modern boogeyman. Not a monster in the woods, not a home intruder, but a threat hiding in plain sight, camouflaged by coincidence. And our culture fears what we cannot categorize. Every explanation of these cases falls into one of 3 major frameworks. Each has evidence, each has problems, and each shapes how we interpret the pattern. The first theory is that it is an organized group of abductors. This is the theory proposed by Gannon and Duarte and a handful of independent investigators. Now, there are some supporting points. There are similar victim profiles across the states. They are consistent disappearance circumstances, bodies found in water after unexplained delays, marks suggest, but not conclusive, of restraint, evidence of possible storage before disposal, and smiley face graffiti clusters. There's geographic overlap with college towns and river systems, and behavioral patterns. There's sudden turns, purposeful walking, odd compliance. Now here's where there's weaknesses to this theory. There's no confirmed members, no confessions, no arrests linked to a group. The graffiti is inconsistent, cases lack of direct forensic evidence, and police departments reject the theory uniformly. So why does this theory still survive? Because the patterns do repeat. Because motives may be ideological, not personal. Because decentralized groups are notoriously hard to detect. If this theory is right, the United States has experienced one of the most sophisticated, least detected, networked killer groups in history. And if it's wrong, then the patterns are illusions created by selective focus. The second theory is that it is one highly mobile serial offender. A smaller yet persistent theory argues that one individual could be responsible. someone who travels frequently, understands rivers, targets nightlife, changes patterns intentionally, and uses water as a forensic destroyer. This theory does have supporting points as well. Some cases share remarkably similar details. The victim demographic is narrow and consistent. Offenders with nomadic tendencies exist in criminal history, and water disposal is known to be an effective forensic erasure, which leads us to the weaknesses of this theory. The distances between cases are significant. There are time gaps and they are uneven. Psychological signatures vary by case, and travel would have to be extensive and untraceable. So, why does this theory still survive? Because sometimes the simplest answer, a single offender, feels more plausible than a coordinated multi-state conspiracy. But simplicity isn't evidence, and evidence isn't simple. This leads us to theory number 3, an unsettling cluster of accidents. This is the official stance of nearly every police department that's involved. Now, here are the supporting points. Alcohol plus water plus cold equals common accidental drowning scenarios, and young men statistically overestimate their physical limits. Riverfront nightlife areas have high fatality rates because many cases lack clear signs of homicide. Graffiti is common and not necessarily connected. So what are the weaknesses? Well, the weaknesses of this theory include that bodies are found upstream. There's unusual behavioral changes, inconsistent decomposition, upright postures in the water of the victims that are found, missing surveillance, missing phones, lack of water-related injuries, and clothing that's too new. There's also lower than expected blood alcohol levels found in the victims. So why does it survive? Well, because bureaucracies prefer explanations that have low liability, clean conclusions, minimal resource allocation, and statistical backing. But statistical trends can obscure individual truths. When researchers digitally map all suspected smiley face cases, something strange begins to happen. A triangle emerges across the Midwest, but patterns also appear on the East Coast, and small clusters form in unexpected states. Then, when researchers adjust filters by age, last seen behavior, timeline gaps, the map reorganizes itself into new shapes. It's almost fractal. Patterns within patterns, contradictions within explanations. So here's the paradox. There are too many similarities to dismiss, yet too many differences to confirm. This is exactly the kind of ambiguity that spawns enduring mystery. To understand the emotional weight of these cases, listen to the families. A mother saying her son would never wander off alone. A father insisting his child was not drunk enough to drown. A sister describing her brother as a strong swimmer. A girlfriend who received a text minutes before he vanished and refuses to believe that he didn't intend to come home. For many families, the official explanations feel too neat, too convenient, too dismissive, and too impersonal. And when families disagree with police, well, a war begins to emerge. Grief versus bureaucracy. Instinct versus statistics, individual cases versus aggregate trends. Sometimes families cling to murder theories because grief needs a villain. Sometimes police cling to accident theories because systems need a category. Both may be wrong. Both may be right. Both may be partially correct. The truth may exist outside all narratives. It's important to acknowledge that not every suspected smiley face case fits. Some victims do have extremely high level of alcohol in their system. No behavioral irregularities. Bodies are found quickly. There's clear evidence of misadventure and no environmental contradictions. These cases act as anchors, reminders that not every drowning is a murder and not every mystery is a conspiracy. But here's the twist. The cases don't fit. The cases that don't fit make the cases that do fit stand out even more. Contrast sharpens patterns, and patterns sharpen questions. And questions sharpen the knife edge of uncertainty. There are now over 150 cases loosely linked to the smiley face theory. Some police departments closed the files years ago, and some remain technically open. Some are sealed, and some are lost in archival transfers. However, independent investigators maintain a list of roughly 45 cases they believe demand reinvestigation. Families maintain their own lists. Online communities maintain others. The files don't match, the criteria does differ, and the outcomes are conflicted. But the central mystery persists. Why do so many similar deaths remain so unresolved? Before we close, let's distill the question at the heart of the entire investigation. Are we seeing a real intentional pattern created by human hands, or a pattern created by our need to impose meaning on tragedy? Is the Smiley Face Serial Killer a group, a lone predator, a myth born of fear, A misinterpretation of similar drownings, a mix of multiple killers and accidents, a cultural phenomenon shaped by incomplete data. The truth is that no one can answer this definitively. Not detectives, not criminologists, not psychologists, not families, not the media, and not even us. But that uncertainty is exactly why the theory refuses to die. Because unanswered questions linger longer than solved crimes. Because ambiguity haunts deeper than proof. Because possibility is more terrifying than certainty. Let's close where we began, with a map full of pins. Each pin represents a young man whose future ended prematurely. No matter the cause, each story holds confusion, contradiction, unanswered moments, a last sighting that doesn't add up, a recovery that raises more questions than closure, and somewhere among these pins the truth exists. Maybe scattered, maybe unified, maybe sinister, maybe mundane, maybe something in between. But here's the truth that matters most. The Smiley Face Serial Killer theory forces us to confront the limits of what we can know, and the even sharper limits of what institutions will admit. Whether these men drowned or were drowned, the ripple left behind is the same. A pattern of tragedies stretching across decades, geography, and the boundaries of belief. So tonight, the case doesn't close, it widens, because every listener will walk away with a different answer. And maybe that's exactly how this story was always meant to end. Not every shadow has a source, and not every answer has a truth. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay in the Night Tales. Have a good night.